I hope everybody's doing well today. I really wasn't going to do this because I didn't really have anything planned until Tuesday, but I decided I would come on today in light of what had just occurred in North Carolina, very close to Fort Bragg. I just watched my friend Ken's video, and it there's a lot of speculation going on surrounding all these things. You have developments in the proxy country with Russia about to launch their major offensive. And, with the grid down situation, you had Iran's IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, making statements in the past that they knew where all the substations are, and that was a message of intent for possible future operations against our grid. Now, the IRGC is Iran's main paramilitary force, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they specifically have plans. Hey, Planet X Watcher, I see you there. They specifically have plans to go after the grid. Now, it's all speculation as to who's really responsible. Now, one thing you should know about China and also Russia is that they have very highly developed cyber warfare programs. And our entire grid is connected to what? It's connected to the internet. So they have programs with which they can use to destroy our grid, and they don't actually have to physically go out to the substations. That's more of like a IRGC commando style type of thing, like where they stormed those places with firearms and shot them up over there in North Carolina. Now, that's something that the IRGC would have like a fingerprint on, as their modus operandi. They would do something like that. And they're an ally of Russia and China. But it's interesting to note that all these countries that hate us have their own means, available at their disposal. Some of them are more high tech, like cyber warfare, and some of them are more on the ground type of things. Now, this also could easily be a flaggeroonie with cheese, a false flaggeroonie with cheese. Now, it could be one of those, and they could be doing it to conveniently try to place the blame on somebody else and doing it to help destabilize this place. Now, remember, according to the word, there has to be a collapse and a civil conflict. So, and I'm talking about before we get invaded. So, this could all be a ploy to, oh yeah, no problem, Pam, and Doopsie Daisy and Planet X Watcher. Welcome, welcome. So, this could all be a ploy to create a situation whereby they destabilize this country. This could be like an inside type of deal where they destabilize the country and help to foment the type of chaos that they need and civil unrest, whereby they can also cause the collapse, the economic, financial, food, and fuel collapse. Now, remember, since August, that's one of my little, for shits and giggles predictions that actually came true. Now, at the end of August, we really started to see the food and fuel crisis in earnest because of the lack of strategic reserves that are remaining, and also the diesel issues, and that affects transportation, it affects trucking, it affects trains, it also affects farming, like the combines and all the machinery that they use to harvest crops. So they are fomenting these issues at different levels domestically, and these are being done by the Western satanic banking elites. They, at the end of the day, have their own objectives, and their objectives are to bring down this country and eliminate a huge swathe of its population. Now, interestingly enough, Who else has a goal like that? Well, China does, but China's goals are different, and here's why. They want to enslave or genocide the American population in order that they can colonize this country for China, for their own interests. They have their own interests. And they, like the satanic Western banking elites, they want a population reduction here as well, but it's for a different reason than the Western elites. Now, the Western elites are doing it because they're satanic and they enjoy their human sacrifices and all this other nonsense, and in their beliefs, they have to create order out of chaos. But here's the thing. God is the ultimate decider in what happens. And here's what's going to happen as per the word. There is going to be a collapse, okay? That's going to happen. It's called famine. Famine's a pretty damn good indicator that you've had a collapse. Let's see. Then there's a civil conflict, because in Jeremiah 50:51, it mentions that there will be violence or conflict between different leaders. It all depends on the translation you read, but that's a civil conflict with multiple factions. Well, much like what we saw in Syria, in the Syrian civil conflict, where all these different factions arose from behind the guise of civil unrest. It all started with what was called the Day of Rage, in quotes, in air quotes. It was called the Day of Rage. And what that was a giant civilian civil unrest situation with lots and lots and lots of rioting and chaos and pandemonium, and all these different factions and groups and sects used the chaos to their best advantage, and they emerged from behind the curtain that chaos provided. And that was when the actual fighting began, sometime after all the civil unrest was created. Now, if you really think about it, these power outages are really nothing new. I mean, what occurred in that county in North Carolina? I mean, we had power outages all across the state of Texas, not even, 2 years ago when we had that winter storm. So, there's going to be more situations like that where you have regional or local power outages, brownouts, so on and so forth. All of that was even covered within my Second American Civil Conflict docu-series playlist. Now, that is a 5 live stream long playlist which has it covers literally all the bases in a Syrian style civil conflict. Hey Mary, hey everybody, and Doopsy Daisy and Planet X Watcher and Pam and everybody, welcome. But that covered really all the bases when it comes to all the different things. I mean, it's low budget, it's kind of cheap in some instances, but I mean, it was really well put together insofar as information was concerned. And hey Alpha, as far as information was concerned, it was extremely well put together. It was extremely coherent insofar as how it presented these ideas and concepts to people. Through the guise of battle maps showing what larger battles would look like. I mentioned more of the low intensity aspects. Now, you have high intensity and low intensity warfare. What high intensity warfare entails, it means you have actual units and armies fighting one another, and you can have use of air power here and there and things like that. It's more intense. Now, low intensity warfare, it's not to be taken lightly, because a lot of people can still die in low intensity warfare. Now, what that means is you have a lot of patrolling, ambushes, traps, occasional exchanges of artillery. I mean, an occasional airstrike here and there, but a lot of people can die in low intensity warfare over a period of time. I mean, it's not to be taken lightly. It just means that there's less people involved, generally speaking, and the intensity level of the fighting is lower than in high intensity warfare, where you have bona fide units and massive groups of people fighting one another. Now, in my internal conflict docu-series, I showed the battle maps, and all of those battles were instances of where it went from low intensity to high intensity, because the resources and logistics were available and transportation was available to get large forces, to concentrate in, single areas, whereas in low intensity, forces are more spread out, there's less numbers of them, and the fighting is more like tit for tat. Whereas in high intensity warfare, you're literally having like a bona fide battle where there's units on the maps and they're going at it. I showed all the battle maps of the high intensity battles, and I mentioned the low intensity warfare. I mentioned all the conditions that added up to create a Syrian style civil conflict where the country was teetering on collapse because the food and fuel system collapsed. Therefore, the supply chain collapsed with it. People starved. The system collapsed, the financial and economic system totally collapsed, and it caused infrastructure to fail as well here and there. So infrastructure generally was working really shitty by that point, and it was only able to be used if dedicated personnel, like service personnel that would go service these facilities, like engineers and technicians and repair people. The infrastructure only worked when you had dedicated service personnel that would go and fix these and upkeep these. And they weren't doing it by the book because obviously they couldn't because they didn't have all the parts, so they had to rig things up. That's what happens in civil wars. Things fail, and people have to, get use some ingenuity when it comes to repairing those things. So, you had a situation like that. Now, what did we see here in the situation in North Carolina? Well, what we really saw there was that we saw a lot of reports of gunfire, and then you hear about this, Rainbow People event that got canceled, and they got all butthurt about it. Pardon the pun, but then you had all that erupt. So what did they do? They instilled a curfew. And the reason they instilled a curfew is because of all the potential for civil unrest after a situation like that. Because one, not only is your power gone, but you also have an event of wokesters getting ruined, and that they're going to raise a stink about that. So you have all these situations, and also the area was adjacent to Fort Bragg, a military base. So if they were some sort of internal element doing such a thing, then they did it near the base for an air of plausible deniability, so that they could blame it on maybe Iran or maybe Russia, even though Russia wouldn't have to do something like that. They don't need to. They have a hell of a cyber warfare capability. Nowhere near China's level, but I mean, Russia could still feasibly shut us off. I mean, just like China could. But China has put so much money into theirs that it's like over the top level of capabilities. It's insane. So Russia and China, they have the ability to shut off our grid. Now, when you have a whole nationwide shutdown, where not only is your grid completely gone, but you also have the telecom fail, and you also have, not just the telecom and grid, but you also have the, what was the other thing? Satellites get knocked out of the air at the same time. So when your GPS also fails with the grid, with everything else, that's how you know that the invasion has begun. And if it's nationwide, but you won't know if it's nationwide. The only way you'll have some idea if it's nationwide is if all those conditions are met, like your GPS doesn't work, your phone doesn't work, the internet doesn't work, the water doesn't work, the power doesn't work. Your car might work, just depending. I mean, but it's, if it's older vehicles, generally from early 2000s and below, they should work fine. I don't know about these newer vehicles. I haven't driven in such a long time because of my head injury. So, I have seizures and such from that. So I don't drive anymore. It's just a safety thing. But, yeah, I mean, when all those conditions are met, we're being invaded. I hope everybody understands that. That's what happened in all of my invasion work. All of my invasion work depicts such a scenario. Once the satellites are swatted down and the cyber warfare of China shuts our grid and telecom and net down, what you have next is you have these massive Trojan shock armies breaking out of their CCP properties inside the United States, along with external forces rolling south from Canada and rolling north from Mexico, beach landing and parachuting in as a heavy handed reinforcements. What's that, Catherine? Repeat. Oh, welcome, Catherine, and Point Fire. Yeah, and Rebecca. Well, yeah, the conditions are this. You know we're being invaded when it's nationwide power and water outages, along with no telecom, no internet, and also the satellites are gone, so your GPS isn't going to work either. Hey, El Romero, great to see you, buddy. So when all of those conditions are met, no, all the satellites will be knocked out of the air by Chinese and Russian anti-satellite weapons like the Chinese FK-2000s, the Russian S-500s. Both of those countries probably have even more advanced means of doing it by now. Hey, Nomix. So, um, when all those things occur at the same time, the Chinese cyber attack, or even a combo of Chinese and Russian cyber warfare, coupled with their use of their anti-satellite weapons to knock our eyes out of the skies. So they're gonna make America deaf, blind, and dumb, so that nothing can be coordinated, not even among the civilian population, because without communications, you can do nothing. You cannot organize. You cannot communicate. You won't even know where your enemy is, or where they're coming from, or what they're bringing with them, like what type of firepower they're coming at you with. You won't know any of that. Which is why I suggest really people listen to my audiobook, because it talks a lot about those conditions and how it affects the partisan uprisings and why the casualties are so lopsided, because more Americans than occupation forces get annihilated because they have no idea where the enemies are attacking from. The enemies see them before the Americans see the enemies, meaning. So they can hit them with artillery, they can hit them with drones, with like missiles coming from drones. They can hit them with strategic heavy bombers. They can hit them with ground attack aircraft for precision strikes. They can hit them with fighter jets that are that are equipped for ground attack missions, like fighter jets that they put some airdropped munitions on, like laser guided munitions, or maybe some free fall munitions, or air to ground missiles. Because fighters can also be armed with ground attack munitions, but usually specialized tactical fighter bombers, which are roughly the same size as fighter jets, but they can carry a heavier payload for ground attack missions. They're specifically designed for ground attack. Heavy strategic bombers are designed for like area saturation bombings, where they just carpet bomb whole areas. But ground attack munitions are designed, or I mean, so I'm sorry, ground attack aircraft, specialty fighter bombers are designed for precision strike missions. Although they can be used for strategic missions, but for that they generally fly in as a group and all hit different specific targets at one time, like strategic targets, like things behind the enemy lines. Because normally ground attack aircraft are used to do precision airstrikes on enemies on the ground. Like if you have like your tank forces rolling in and they encounter some sort of stiff defenses, they can call in a precision airstrike, and a ground attack aircraft to fly in and drop some like heavy munitions on the whatever target is that was called in. Normally those are that's why they call them tactical fighter bombers, because normally they support the ground troops in while they're conducting ground combat operations. But they can be used for strategic missions, but nations with heavy strategic bomber aircraft really don't have to do that, because they just use those to carpet bomb cities and installations or whatever they're going after. So China and Russia have a shit ton of heavy strategic bombers. China has almost twice what we have, and Russia has immense amounts, because they have a lot that are left over from the Cold War that are still in storage and still well maintained. You know, They're like sort of like how we kept the B-52 for so long because it can carry such a big payload. The B-52, even though it's really old, it's still very effective because all the avionics have been upgraded in it, the radars, all that. It's the same thing with the Chinese and Russian older bombers. They've all been heavily upgraded and they're all highly effective at area saturation bombing. So, they have a much, much bigger fleet of those than we could ever muster. So, and China outnumbers us by about 1,050 combat aircraft anyway, because China has the biggest fighter and tactical fighter bomber fleet on the face of the earth, and they have the second biggest strategic bomber fleet. So when you combine all three of those categories, China has the most massive combat air fleet on Earth. Not overall air force, not yet, but they're getting up there. But China has the most combat aircraft. The only reason why we have a little bit bigger of an air force in China for now is because we have a lot of support aircraft. We have our Air Mobility Command, which is a lot of cargo aircraft, and we also have fuelers and we have trainers and other AWACS and things like that. China has all that too, but they just don't have the numbers of it that we do yet. But they're catching up quick. But they already have more combat planes than we do by a humongous gulf, by a massive gulf. So China's combat air fleet is massively bigger than ours. It's bigger than Russia's too, by quite a bit. China's enormous when it comes to air power, navy, and their ground forces. Nobody can touch China. They're enormous, and their missile forces, their strategic missile forces, rocket forces. I've heard it used interchangeably. They're the biggest missile forces on the face of the earth too. Russia's second. Russia's basically second in everything except for artillery, which they're tied with China, and also helicopters, which they barely have a lead over China. China started putting a lot of money lately into building more helicopters now that their massive industrial plants have come online like 5 years ago. China's been producing stuff like a fool, and they already had a big industrial capability before anyway, but now that they've added all these massive factory complexes, they're freaking enormous. But it doesn't matter how many helicopters anybody has. China has the biggest air defense forces on Earth, so they have the countermeasures to helicopters. They can swat them all down. So nobody can mess with China. Nobody. And Russia will kick our ass too. Russia's the second overall most powerful in conventional forces, but they have the biggest nuke forces. But China's nuke arsenal is just extremely modernized though, because they have fractional orbital bombardment, and it works. Their nukes are also newer. They have enough nukes to destroy two large countries anyway, because the real numbers are about 1,000 because of how many warheads each missile can carry, how many silos they've added in Xinjiang to what they've already had. They have road and rail mobile, and they've had the fissile material to really have 1,200 nukes. But I go with the high median estimate of 1,000 because of what the silos, the fissile material, which is 22 tons of uranium, weapons grade uranium, enriched uranium, and they have 2 to 4 tons of plutonium. It's somewhere in between there. It's enough for them to have 1,000 nukes, easy, because they can have 1,200 if they want. There's a lot of lowball estimates. People underestimate China, and it's so stupid. It's all Western propaganda, because people, if they do their real due diligence and actual research and go look up production numbers and numbers of factories and everything else, you'll see that China's just freaking massive. They're massive. And I'm not talking about from Western sources. You have to go look at other sources, because there's other sources that'll tell you the truth. I look at a lot of Southeast Asian sources from like Thailand and Vietnam, like independent analysts from places like that. They know more about this stuff than really anybody. But so basically, hey, CoinTelPro and Aaron and everybody, good to see you all. Who else is up here? Catherine, and good to see you, Catherine. I haven't seen you in a while. Point Fire. Yeah, the Chinese are in Canada like some fools. I mean, they're hey, cats. Oh, he's doing great. He's doing good. Yeah, there's Chi-coms all over Canada. They're in Mexico. So are all their allies too. But this stuff that happened in North Carolina, what I'm saying is that, oh yeah, Russia will annihilate us. So will China especially, but Russia will kick our ass too. China and Russia are thick as thieves anyway. They're both best pals. If you watch my last live, I talk about all of that stuff about what they've been up to lately. And Russia is building up really enormous forces right now for this sweep, this winter offensive that they're going to conduct very soon. They're going to finish that country off, no problem. And but at least it'll be over. At least it'll be over. But yeah, Ken, good to see you too, buddy. Great to see you. Yeah, Russia will whoop our ass, and so will China, especially China. China, we don't have anywhere close to the forces that China has. I'm trying to find Porky for cats. I can't find him. I don't know where he is. Oh, there he is. There he is. That's him. He's a good boy. He's a good Porky. That's you. That's you. There's May and Romero. They're all just chilling. But yeah, today was a practice day, seeing how fast I could put my armor on and get geared up and everything, because all the hanky-panky going on in this country. Like I said, I watched Ken's video a bit earlier, and he had a lot of good things to say in his video. Speaking of Ken, who's in the chat, but the speculation is really endless. It's endless. Yeah, he's a sharp-looking cat. Cats. He's a really good boy. He's really sharp. I thought he looked pretty cool when I adopted him. So he also wanted out of there the most. So I had to take him. But basically, the situation is such that really any of those possibilities that I mentioned at the beginning of this video are fully realistic, and they all have different angles of where they could go, whether it be to start a civil conflict, like a Syrian-style internal conflict, or whether it be to basically beta tests for their invasion, because, the IRGC, Iran is part of the Eurasian bloc. So they are a staunch Chinese and Russian ally. And Iran's IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they've made statements that they know where all of our substations are, so that they could carry out commando raids. But remember, with China and Russia, they don't have to do that. Theirs could be more of like a cyber attack, like in my scenarios. They would be like in my scenarios. Yeah, everybody should be getting ready, Aaron, because even if they're trying to get a civil action, I'll just say, started, at least if you have your armor and your gear and everything, you'll be safer than most, because you need something to protect you from, what's going to be all the projectiles that are going to be flying in the air. You need something to realistically protect you from projectiles. This German military IBA, this is level 3, and the plates I put in it are level 4, because these steel sappy plates that I have inside of it, they can take mag after mag after mag of 5.56 or 7.62 by 39 Soviet Chinese ammo dumped into it over and over and over. They can even take 7.62 by 54, which is an even longer round than the 39 is, the 7.62 by 39, which is what goes in your standard AKM or SKS. Those are even longer. And now you also have the 7.62 by 51 NATO, which is like NATO's answer to like the 7.62 by 54, which is Russian and Chinese. So this armor can take that too. Now, that means it can also withstand 30-06, big rounds like that. Now, if you go any bigger than that, I don't know about a Lapua round or a like a, I don't know, a 50 round, but you never know with these steel plates. I watched a really funny video, speaking of steel plates. Now, somebody did a test on some steel plates they ordered from, what was it? Wish or something like that. They ordered some steel plates that came from China, and I mean, for armor, right? And he tested all kinds of stuff on it, and he was amazed because he fired a 50 out of a Barrett, a civilian Barrett. He fired a 50 round at it, and it didn't penetrate this stuff. He thought it was going to be really cheap because it came from China, and it actually ended up withstanding a 50. But even if you get hit with a 50 wearing that thing, you're going to have some broken bones, and the force of that impact, because normally a 50 round will blow right through you and practically almost blow you in half. If you get hit by a 50, even with something that can withstand it, the shock of it will probably kill you. Probably, be similar to like hydrostatic shock. It's physics. The energy from that round is going to transfer into you some kind of way, and it's going to break some bones, and it might even end you, depending on like the shock of it, the vibration of of the round's impact, the energy from it, so. I wouldn't buy anything from Wish, but the armor I do have, I know is effective. I've seen it tested, and I've seen mag after mag of standard small arms ammunition get dumped into it, and it did nothing to it, barely even scratched it. But yeah, everybody should have protection. Everybody should have protection. Everybody should have a helmet. This is more for like protection from shrapnel, or it can protect from pistol rounds that are at closer range, and it can also protect you from rifle ammo that's fired from a long distance. Like if it's like a 7.62 by 39, and it's fired from like 400 meters away, this might protect you from that if it's far enough, because the energy of the impact might be something like a standard 9mm round by the time it hits it, from 400 meters away. So same with like an even larger round, like a 7.62 by 54 fired from like 800 or 900 meters away. This might protect your head, but this is mostly for protection from shrapnel, but it can also protect you from pistol ammunition too. So you should have protection for your head and for your body, like mine even has these, the collars even go up to protect your neck from shrap, hold on a second. Got this rifle sling here. A sling holding it up. Okay. You can even do this, and there you go. It'll protect your, hold on, I gotta align that there. It'll protect your neck. So, if something goes off and it's near you, you got something that'll keep your neck safe from all the shrapnel pieces, so you don't have like pieces of metal go and rip your throat up or anything, So it's good to have protection. You want to be protected as much as possible, because they're, in a situation where this place becomes something like Syria, you're going to need all the protection you can get. Realistically, you're going to need protection. So why anybody hasn't bought plate carriers at a bare minimum or armor yet? See, this is full-on armor, but they also sell plate carriers, which are generally lighter, because it's just for the sappy plates themselves, and it's not like all this extra stuff like the neck and shoulders and everything else. Kind of see. That's what full-on armor's like. But a lot of people haven't bought those things yet, but you can order them online, but it's getting almost too late to where you can trust online orders, because there's a lot of hanky-panky going on with not only the supply chain, but some of these parcel companies. So beware of that. You also should be learning very basic tactics, and I have a lot of materials people can learn from if they would only go to my community tab story review, or actually listen and pay attention to the audiobook, or read the typed out stories, because when you read the typed out stories too, and you really pay attention to what the characters endure and what they go through, the successful ones are the ones you want to pay attention to, because the ones that aren't successful, they're gone. They're out of there. So you can learn from those stories. You can learn from the story review playlist. You can also learn from the audiobook, because the audiobook is nothing more than just an orally read story. Instead of it being typed out, I read to people. So it's the same concept as the typed out stories, only it's read. And it's very, very, very long. So I also have the community tab story reviews. Now those story reviews are excellent because at the very last video especially, the first hour and a half of that is nothing but tactics. And I also talk about a lot of other perils within that story review. I talk about all the big key points that occurred throughout the typed out stories, because this was done before I started the audiobook project. So this is all about my typed out stories in the community tab that are further back, which is why I rotate videos that I share, because if I start sharing videos and let them build up, people can't go back and read the stories. So that's why I do it like that. So basically, people should be getting ready, because this winter and this next year are going to be very tough, because everything's going down. And everything that I've made hypothetical scenarios about, including the Syrian-style civil conflict one, looks to be coming true. Especially when you pay attention to the first two videos, or I should say a video and a half, because the first video and a half is the background stories, because it's a 5-video long playlist. The first video and a half are a story which articulates everything that led to that situation breaking out and occurring. So when you see efforts to destabilize this country, that fits into that category. I mean, it fits into the overreach, FFs. I talk about all of that. I even talk about the beast marks and the mandates and how they affected the armed forces. I briefly shared a video, speaking of, and it was all about how our armed forces is getting rid of a lot more people than they've admitted to. I used to talk about that 260,000 number. Guess what? It's 500,000. Nearly a quarter of our armed forces is almost gone. They're going to kick out a quarter of our armed forces for not complying. That's your future Free American Army faction. And I talked about that in my part 1 video when they're in their meeting room at the Army Reserve, because it is mostly the reserves and guardsmen who aren't doing this. So at the Army Reserve's headquarters, in that first part, they even talk about that when I read the section having to do with how the Free American Army faction came to be a faction. When I was reading that portion, I mentioned the mandates and that thing specifically, the beast marks. I mentioned that specifically. People really should go watch that. I'm running out of battery power. But that was an excellent explanation of not only everything that's going on. I had to plug this in, at least so I can last to the end here. That was an excellent explanation about not only everything that'll lead into a Syrian-style conflict, but realistically how factions would develop and along what lines. It even represented everybody and everything. Most of it is even happening right now in real time and has been. I made that documentary before the whole thing kicked off in Mexico, the drug war that's been forcing narco militants onto our side of the border. There's your La Raza narco state. I mentioned that as the cause of their faction in my documentary. I also mentioned the mandates and other things that created the Free American Army faction. I mentioned, I had everybody represented, and I mentioned very real things that are occurring. Even the situation that's going on now in the Mormon church created the Mormon state from the FLDS extremists. that live on compounds and such. They had a church coup to boot out the mainstream church leaders so that they could instill their own radical version of Mormonism. So I had cults represented. I had secular humanists represented in the guise of the National Salvation Revolutionary Front faction, who took "Make America Great Again" to like the 10th power, so extreme that they became ultra nationalists to the point where they worshiped the state. They worshiped their own version of the new America, and they wanted to destroy globalism because ultra nationalism is diametrically opposed to globalism, to these Western elites, and they were going after them and their supporters and wokesters and everything. They had massive purges. That this country will be a mess. This place will be like shattered into multiple fragments, and there's different factions that are going to take over different portions of the country, just like what happened in Syria. We are not special. It can happen to us too. Nothing about this country is special to where that's going to where America's going to be the exception, and nothing like what's occurred overseas will happen here. No, Syria made the best template for what could happen here. And Syria is much smaller and less populated than we are. It's only really in land mass about 2/3 the size of California. And not only that, but in population, it's about half the population of California. So what occurred in tiny Syria with all of these factions, over a dozen of them? People think that's not going to happen here? Get real. Get real. Get a grip. Get a grip on yourself. It will happen here, and the regime will be on the ropes, just like Bashar al-Assad's regime was in Syria. They will lose territory quick. They will only have enough personnel and resources to even be able to hold on to their woke loyalist areas. The military will fracture. You'll have the people like the Free American Army do their own thing. You'll have other factions get other parts of the military along local lines. People will leave. They will leave, and they will take everything they have with them. That's exactly what will happen. And they will go to these different factions, just like in my documentary. It's exactly what will happen. And it'll weaken us to such an extreme that China and Russia, they'll just walk in and take this place. It'll be that easy. Because they're austere. Could they kick our ass right now and take us over? Hell yeah, they could. But then they would have to deal with an uprising. Once they occupied this, if they did it right now, they would destroy us militarily and take us over. But once they had their troops here occupying this place, they would have to fight a counterinsurgency. And they don't want to do that because they want to get on to strip mining and exploiting this land as soon as possible. They don't want to wait. They don't want to wait. So what better than to let us have a collapse and an internal conflict first, and let us destroy each other so that they don't have to worry about fighting a counterinsurgency. Once they crush this place and walk in and take over, they don't have to worry about putting uprisings down. They can just have it, and they can just bring in all their civilian labor and their workers from China, and they can start strip mining this place, and they can start taking advantage of all the people that are like non-combatant civilians and take them into slavery or exterminate them, like the Waffen-SS did in the territories Germany conquered. That's exactly what the Chinese PAP will do here. PAP is just the new version of the Waffen-SS. They're brutal. What they do in Western China and Xinjiang to the Uyghurs, yeah, imagine how bad it'll be here. They hate us. So I articulated that pretty well in my audiobook too, especially in my newer parts. So basically, China's going to let us disintegrate, collapse, and then they're going to let us have our internal conflict. And then when we're sufficiently weakened to their liking, then they'll invade. They could invade now and kick our ass now, but then it'll be like my audiobook, where they have to fight counterinsurgencies like they do in my audiobook. They don't want to do that. It's a waste of resources to them. They're cheap, they're frugal, they're austere. So is Russia. Russia and China don't want to do that. They would rather wait for us to just disintegrate, fall apart, annihilate each other in a civil conflict like Syria, like how Syria was, before they invade us. So That is how it's going to happen. That's how the Bible says it's going to happen in Jeremiah 50 and 51. That's exactly how it's going to go down. There's going to be a collapse, a civil conflict, and then the foreign invasion. Because it says in Jeremiah 50 and 51 that conflict or violence will erupt between various leaders, like faction leaders, factions, leaders, various leaders. That's factions, folks. That's Syria, Assyrian style. Multi-way, like a battle royale, like in WWF, where they had like those battle royales where they had like 16 people all duking it out. That's going to be what it'll be like here, but with the different factions, like in Syria, where they're all fighting each other. And after that, then we get invaded. When we're at our absolute, total, most broken down, weakest state, that's when they come in. So, yeah, that's basically all I had to say. So, everything you're seeing happening, you know, speculation is endless, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I just gave some possibilities. I outlined some very distinct possibilities of exactly why these things are happening and what the purpose is, and you know what purpose it serves in the overall plans of either the Eastern elites of the Eurasian bloc or the Western elites of the Western bloc, the Western satanic banking elites of the Western central bank class. And then you have the Eastern elites, who are like the CCP and the Russian political oligarchy, the leaders of India. They have their own organizations. They have their own. They own their own central banks. They're not beholden to nobody. They issue their own currencies. They have their own systems. They have their own financial transaction messaging systems. They're not beholden to anybody else. You know, they have their own plans. China wants to take us over for their own interests so that they can exploit this place to the extreme. Same with Russia. Same with all their little allies that are in tow with them too, the toe the line, that obey China and also Russia. You know, I mean, they all have their own plans to exploit this place that are separate from what the Western elites want. Like I said, when you look beyond the surface, there's issues that go far deeper than what the surface issues appear, because there's a lot of various dynamics at play that are much deeper than the surface level issues. You know, things are different than what people think they are. I'll just put it that way. And because when you look deeper than the surface level, you get to see what all these people's different agendas are, what they all really want, and why they'll do business dealings with one another one day, and then the next day they'll go to war because it suits them. Sometimes it suits them to do business. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it suits them to go to war. They all have their own methods, plans, ideas. They're all in a power struggle. This is called a power struggle for world domination. These are megalomaniacs. Every last one of them is a megalomaniac. They all want world domination. They all want world domination. So they're all power hungry, and they're all in a power struggle. It goes even deeper than money. It's about power and control. And the East has their own plans separate from what the West has. So, you know, it's a power struggle, folks. They're all fighting for who's going to control the NWO. And the 10 Eastern Kings, after World War III is concluded, who will defeat the West in World War III, they will be the leaders, the Eurasian bloc. It'll be an Eastern-dominated NWO led by the Beast, because they'll all give their power to the Beast, because he'll promise that he'll be able to fix the whole world after the East crushes the West in World War III. So that's the world that's coming. So thank you all for coming to the live, this unplanned live, and glad so many people came in the chat. It's good to see everybody. Planet X Watcher and Nomix and Aaron and Ken and Mary and Rebecca and let's see who else. Cats and Planet X Watcher and Swim Upstream and everybody. Alexander And that's it. I get everybody. And Catherine, good to see you, Catherine, again. Welcome back. CoinTelPro, PointFire, Ken, and everybody. You all have a blessed day. Thank you all for coming.